Oh, you've got...
Just like to introduce yourself.
To you? We've met already, you know that, don't you? Yeah. Hi! Well, I'm Justin from a winery. My winery is called Samuel's Gorge. A little winery in the northern ridge of the Southern Vales, which is a wine region on St Vincent's Gulf, south of Adelaide. You've got to talk to me. I feel like I'm just talking to myself. Anyway, I mean, Samuel's Gorge is a place that's probably a combination of a lot of journey in the wine world. I've done 3 vintages in Bordeaux, 2 in the Napa Valley, and now 21 harvests in Australia, so it's a great life. It allows you to see a lot of the world. In 2003 I finally decided that I wanted to step out on my own and make booze for an audience that was, you know, appreciated subtlety and harmony and balance. You'll have to excuse me, I'm having a beer sorbet. It's keeping me fresh. You'll note that most winemakers enjoy their beer. Yeah, so it's a tiny place. It's a very spiritual place. It's a place where the locals like to come and relax, and it's a very welcoming little winery on top of a hill on the Seaview Ridge. I specialise or only work with 3 key varietal reds. Tempranillo is relatively new to our country. We released in 2003, so this is now the 5th Tempranillo. I love Grenache, and for anyone who happens to tune into this, old vine Grenache, the Grenache we've got in Barossa and McLaren Vale is some of the world's oldest plantings of the variety, and a real statement to our heritage of winemaking in this country. So it's being revived. There's a lot of interest in it in recent years. Very exciting wines come from good Grenache. And Shiraz. We come from South Australia. South Australia is a Shiraz land. In fact, not a lot of Shiraz is growing around the world. We sort of think in Australia that Shiraz is grown everywhere on the globe, but we have extraordinary diversity in Shiraz styles in this country, which is exciting. The modern Australian wine industry is very dynamic. You get choice of character and varieties and styles and blends that we're very, very spoiled in this country. So Shiraz ain't Shiraz ain't Shiraz, and what I'm trying to do is definitely tone down the power of what God gave us from the sunshine and introduce lots of layers of flavour and excitement. I guess wine should be exciting. It should automatically give you a smile in your heart. So my mecca is really to make bloody good drink, something that makes people happy, and that's the biggest buzz in what we do. I love to cook, and presenting a meal for people and presenting a beverage that lets people relax and forget the hardship of life is a privilege.
So what's your favourite present food and wine combination?
It changes. I love Moroccan food. I like the quirky twists of cinnamon over preserved lemon over prune with smoked paprika with coriander, all in the one dish, and it's not clumsy. I also like very simple combinations. Good tomatoes. A good tomato with, like we had before, with buffalo mozzarella and 1 leaf of basil. Food does, and bloody good olive oil doesn't get more exciting than that. The Italians, with the purity of what they do in their cooking, is very exciting. But then I also like good French. I'm less inclined to like trickery in my food, although the foams and the moles and the very interesting. Often is quite fiddly, and at the end of the day, you need to be fed. Not in a gross kind of way. I really enjoy the fact that we're moving into small morsel culture.
What's been your best wine experience so far?
There's many wine experiences. I could bore you for the rest of the day about wine experiences. It's common in our industry to celebrate the end of harvest where you've worked hard, and it's part of a winery to have an end of vintage festival or party. And it's always great fun. We've had a sleep deficit, we haven't seen the world, and we've finished harvest and everything's in the winery, and you let your hair down and kick up your heels. But I went to California one year, and friends of mine were working on the Sonoma coast, and it's only in a vintage party I've been to at Flowers where I've not had to do the vintage. So a very fun period of my time was working in Napa Valley. I think Napa Valley is an extraordinary place. My time with Jacques Pellissier in Bordeaux, a very solid, gruff Frenchman with a lot of passion in his belly, was extraordinary. My reference to texture, on the palate, my reference to a lot of the floral notes in wine is probably on the back end of the Bordeaux experience. But it goes on. Working at Chateau Tabilk, doing vintage lived in Ngambie for nearly 2.5 years. Working with that beautiful old winery in Tabilk. Don Lewis, who was the senior winemaker at Mitchelton at the time. They've got his own label now, but working with them, working with Marsan, ahead of his time with the Southern Rhone varietals, that was awesomely engaging. There's not a day goes by. I think that's the beautiful thing about the wine industry. It's a great life. The region that I work in, McLaren Vale, has no frost, has no humidity, has bright sunshine, minimal seasonal rain. So by practice, you can actually relatively easily make what I would call organic wines. Biodynamic is about healthy practice with the dirt and in the vineyard. And I love the earth. I've grown up in horticulture, so I respect all of that. And further to that, we don't need chemicals in our winery. Our winery is all red focused, and in fact, the grunge and the organisms and the open air and the wild ferments that I do all impact on the character and the soul in the wine. So to buff it up, to make a winery so-called sterile would probably make my wines quite simple. The fact that I'm very loose in the way I make wine, which is something you get to after a big journey. You don't all of a sudden just be lazy. Apathy is not what I'm talking about, but certainly having the ability to be hands-off in wine and let it happen in a natural course is part of what we do. Yeast and these organisms all around us, the concept of sterility and trying to wash your hands every minute of the day, at the end of the day, it's all around us. So in a wine environment especially, I basically ferment under an eave, which is outside, in a very old setup, 150-year-old slate tanks that are beeswax lined. You're open to the environment, and the characteristics of yeast give different characteristics in the wine. So we may inoculate with one in a winery, but there's no one strain of yeast that contributes to a ferment. There's a multitude. So at the end of the day, I just prefer the wild stuff to do the work. The ferments are slower. My wines spend a long time on skins. We're not in a hurry, like I was explaining before. I don't wear a watch. Our compulsion to know what time it is. I wake up to the sun and the birds. I don't have an alarm clock. I naturally wake up, and once you start getting in tune with those sorts of things, and the world will keep turning with or without you, so you may as well just go with it. So certainly the concept of biodynamics, if you're in wine long enough, and vineyards particularly, you should be aware of the phases of the moon. They impact on our moods, they impact on the flavour ripening phases of the grape, they impact on the growing patterns of the vine. It's said to impact on the way the wine tastes. Some of it's literal, some of it's spiritual, and I'm happy just to go with it. So, oh, good.